the doctor came back, he said, remember that conversation we had after your surgery? That if you hurt your neck again, we weren't going to fight this. We were going to call it quits and move on. I said, yeah. He goes, well, today's that day. I've got something going on that is no longer pain. And it's not only an injury, but seems to be a substantial injury. The journey back was so hard, which again kind of emphasizes why did I put my wife and family and friends through all that. That's a scary transition, and I think we lose a lot of our NFL brothers in that transition when the career ends, because it ends so abruptly. Whether it's by injury or age, that career can end pretty quickly. You do struggle to find your identity. Okay, who am I going to be now? You know, you're relatively young, 34, 35 years old, and you've got to go out and reinvent yourself.
My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Today's conversation is with one of my friends and fellow Orangemen, Daryl Johnston. Daryl, you have lived several football lives. You were a star at Syracuse University, a second-round pick by the Dallas Cowboys, a three-time Super Bowl champion, one of the defining fullbacks of your era, and then you built a long second career as a broadcaster and football executive. Your career is interesting because the numbers do not fully explain it. Your job was often to take the hit, make the block, protect the quarterback, and help someone else become the name people remember. For someone hearing you for the first time, what is the most important context they need to understand about your life, your role on those Cowboys teams, and the experiences that shaped how you see football now?
Wow, what a fantastic, deep question. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, Tim, is like you said, you know, my value to the team was never going to be measured statistically or from a scoring perspective. So I think the biggest thing for me that I would always share with people is they'll actually ask me, why did you do what you did? You know, giving up your body, risking injury for somebody else to receive all the glory. And the reason that football is the greatest team sport is because you're willing to do that for the success of the team. And for me, you could kind of see the potential that the team was going to have. And I was trying to excel in my role as a fullback in that offense because I wanted to be a part of what I thought was going to happen for the Dallas Cowboys. I did not expect 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, but I did see early on, some of the great qualities in our star players on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, the leadership of Jimmy Johnson and our staff, ownership, willing to do whatever it takes to create a championship. And I wanted to be a part of that. So when you go to some of the facilities and you see that catchphrase, do your job, I always add a little bit to it. Do your job better than anybody else can. And that was what my mission was in Dallas, because I wanted to be a part of that team. I could see the potential that they had. And I took a lot of pride in it. It is a physical position, but we were a physical offense, and there's nothing more flattering to me than when I get lumped in with my offensive line, because I think that they're one of the best that was ever assembled in the history of the NFL.
Did you know, you said you could see some of those special characteristics and all that, but did you know, like the people like whatever, Aikman and Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin and yourself on that O-line, did you know that people would be talking about them as much as they are later? Like, could you tell early on that they were like that impactful in the game?
Yeah, you could see the difference with the way that Troy threw the football. I think obviously you'll hear a lot of people talk about his accuracy and his strength. I mean, he could throw the comeback from the the opposite hash all the way across the field, on a line, and so he's got those characteristics. But for me, running a lot of underneath routes, it was the most catchable football that I've ever had the opportunity to catch from a quarterback. I haven't had a lot of quarterbacks in my life, but I made 2 Pro Bowls, so you get around some of the other great quarterbacks in the NFC. and nobody threw a more catchable ball underneath than Troy. So he had great touch, great strength, great accuracy. So that was unique. Michael Irvin was the hardest working guy in our team, even with all that talent. So that was a rare combination. And then with Emmett, I think I got onto Emmett's career when he was at Escambia High School. I have no idea why. I was drawn to him when he was playing football in Florida. I followed him to the University of Florida, and I just thought, he was a very, very unique runner. There was a knock on Emmett coming out. He doesn't have that breakaway speed, but there's not a lot of examples of Emmett getting run down from behind by a defender on a long run. So he was pretty talented himself. So it was very obvious early on how good these guys were and how unique they were at their positions. And then I think that the really special thing for us was when Norv Turner came and we were going to install the Rams offense. And we started to see how the skill sets of all the key players on our offensive side of the ball fit perfectly into what was required for that offense. At the tight end position, the fullback position, the X and Z wide receiver positions, the running back position, and then you had to have that big offensive line, up front to make everything work. It was amazing when we're watching the install that first spring, and we're like, wow, this is like tailor-made to the skill sets that we have with all of our guys. I mean, this could be something special with this offense, and it definitely ended up being something special.
This will be fun because even though we're friends, I feel like there are a lot of things about your life I don't know. So let's go back to your roots. Daryl, when you were growing up in Youngstown, New York, what did football give you that you did not get anywhere else?
Oh gosh, Tim, very, very humble beginnings for me. I think I was blessed to be around some very talented football people during my formative years. But Western New York is not a robust high school football hotbed. So, we always used to kind of kid around, when all the scouts came down I-90 across New York State, they were usually going into Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio on I-90. And you had to be pretty special for them to get off the thruway and head up into Western New York, into the Niagara area. So I think for me, I started playing when I was 8. It was a game that really resonated with me at an early age. I don't know if it was the physical component to it, the camaraderie component, but I did have good coaches. I really did, especially when I was young. Dick Maslin, going all the way back to my times in youth football, and Gil Tomei and Mark Johnson and Mike Prescott, and Harry Lawler at high school. But we had Pete Rayo and Lou Carreri, who were phys ed teachers at the high school, and Pete was very well known and respected for his ability to recognize talent, and did some work with the Buffalo Bills. Lou was just a legendary defensive coach up in that part of New York State. So, a little town. I mean, it took 3 towns to make up our high school, and yet we had some pretty remarkable people when you think about being exposed to good football minds, and people that could develop a passion for the game at a young age. So very blessed there, but it really didn't translate a whole lot when I was leaving high school. There weren't a whole lot of opportunities for me. I know recruiting has changed drastically since back in 1984. And there's probably a lot more guys that could fall through the cracks on you back at the time that we were leaving high school and getting ready to go to college. But I mean, for you, Tim, being, that 5-star high school athlete that the entire country knew about, with a Division I college, right down the road from you, I was coming from a very small area that was, kind of a rural town, farming community, not really known for our football, but we did have a couple of guys come out. We had Mark Saya, who went to Notre Dame. We had Tom Blinko that went to Ohio State. So we did have some guys come out of our high school that went on to big colleges. But my year, there was not a lot of activity and interest. And in my journey to Syracuse is one that's pretty amazing. I mean, I was not really recruited by Syracuse until December of my senior year. I was really kind of on my way to Cornell. Maxie Bond was coming in as the new head coach. I was a good student in high school. I'd be able to get an academic scholarship and and defray some of the costs that were going to be there for your college loan when you graduated. I was thinking about Ithaca and some of the other big, powerful schools at the Division III level in New York and the Pennsylvania area. So that's kind of where I was set on until Syracuse kind of came on board. And, I found out that I got on their radar from a game that I had played my senior year from somebody who else had sent the film in. So that kind of got me on the radar. And, from that point on, it was just kind of the luck of somebody that had already verbally committed to another school, I think Penn State, and then withdrew that. So they had a slot open late in the recruiting process. And the consensus was, and Kyle Federley, our unbelievable equipment manager at Syracuse University, shared this with me. The consensus was, let's take the kid from Western New York. We'll keep the alumni from Western New York quiet for a couple of years, and we'll have a great practice player for the next 5 years. So the expectations for me coming to Syracuse were not very high. I always feel blessed that doors opened and opportunities presented themselves. And whether sometimes it's luck or sometimes the belief of one individual who champions you, it was a very interesting journey to get to Syracuse. And I will say, Tim, that when I got there and bumped into guys like you, I understood why I was lightly recruited. It was overwhelming for me those first couple of weeks of training camp to see the athlete on our roster back then in 1984.
So when you were coming out, somebody else sent video trying to get recruited, and they were watching that tape and saw you. They noticed you.
Yeah. Keith Landers from Alden, and Keith and I knew each other. We did punt, pass, and kick together for a couple of years. So we got to know each other, and Alden had a phenomenal, they had one of those like freakish classes that came through together. And they were a division below us, but were awesome. We played them that year, and it was 8-8. And they sent the tape in. That was one of the tapes that was sent into Syracuse, and they inquired about, hey, who's 34 on the other team? We'd like to get a little bit more information on him.
How crazy is that? What a small thing.
Yeah.
All three of us played at Syracuse. What made you choose Syracuse? And when you got there, what was harder than you expected?
I was kind of like Richard Gere, and an officer and a gentleman. I had nowhere else to go. If I was going to go Division I, that was my one opportunity. So for me, it was really coming to terms with the fact, why is Syracuse the only Division I school that recruited me? I had sent my tapes into Penn State, Boston College, West Virginia, and did not get responses. So there was a little bit of doubt there to make that decision. But I will say that Jim Butterfield, the head coach at Ithaca, played a role. Because while I was visiting Ithaca, he asked who else was recruiting me, and I went through the list of Cornell and all the other Division III schools, and then I said, well, Syracuse has reached out here recently, so that's something that's new. And he looked up from taking notes and said, Syracuse. He goes, you can't play at Syracuse. And at that time in my life, I was a huge prove you wrong guy. I mean, if you said I couldn't do something, that was instant motivation for me. So I kind of knew I was going to Syracuse when I walked out of Jim Butterfield's office that day. So I probably owe him a bit of thanks for really kind of lighting a fire underneath me. So my biggest thing, Tim, was I was going to be able to graduate college without any debt. And that was important to me. And if I was going to be that really productive practice player for 5 years and really have no role on the Syracuse football team in regards to, a record standpoint or statistics, and just somebody that helped get the team ready, then so be it. I would graduate, without any college debt. But even that got a little uneasy at one point. That first year there, as I mentioned, you see the talent of the athletes. You understand why you were recruited late at Syracuse. I had a lot of work to do just to catch up to where everybody else seemed to be. And even in my recruiting class, there was some very, very talented guys in my recruiting class. Marcus Paul, Cooper Gardner, and those were a couple of guys from our class in '84 that were the first guys onto the field. Chris Ingram, there were some really good players, in that class. And just looking at my contemporaries, I knew I had a lot of work to do to catch up. And we were, it was one of the scrimmages during training camp, and just walking back to the apartments at Skytop with my mom and dad, and kind of lagging back a little bit with my dad. And I said, I think I'm really in over my head here. Maybe everybody was right. Maybe I don't belong here. And my dad gave me, some great advice, some words of wisdom, a ton of support, and kind of reinforced that. He goes, what's the worst case scenario? You spend 5 years here, you build some great friendships, and you graduate college without any debt. You're not going to get that anywhere else. So, honor your scholarship, do the best you can for the next 5 years, and I think you're going to surprise yourself. So I hung in there, and Jim Hoffer showed up my redshirt sophomore year. You know how great Mike Wojcik is, for not just you and me, but for everybody that had the blessings to be around him, to get into that weight room with Mike Wojcik, as a freshman who hadn't really been into an extensive weightlifting program, and watch the magic that he worked, and got me strong enough, explosive enough, fast enough to start to have the confidence that I did belong at that level.
At Syracuse, when did you first realize you were not just a good player, but someone who could play on Sundays? Was there an aha moment?
I don't think an aha moment. There was one breaking into the starting lineup. I had a good block on an upperclassman, and it was kind of when I was coming into my own, and the fullback position was wide open that spring. That was one of the competitions, and I had that one early on in spring football, and that really kind of pushed me through spring, and really helped my confidence. And like I said, having Jim Hoffer there, for the first time in my career at Syracuse was a huge plus too. Just a different way of framing things and looking at things, and finding the positives, wherever they were. You could go out and have a bad spring practice, and Jim would bring you in, and you'd feel a heck of a lot better walking out of the film room than you did walking into the film room, just because he could find all the good stuff that you did, and keep you from worrying about all the things that you felt you didn't do a great job in. So that was kind of the aha moment getting into the starting lineup. But the aha moment in the NFL, I don't know if there really was one. I think you look back after, you finish your junior year, and you watch, your senior class teammates start to get drafted, because we had a very good football team my junior year. And then you just watch the guys that are having the opportunity to go have an NFL shot after that season. And you start to think, wow, I wonder if I'll have that opportunity next year. So it really wasn't an aha moment, I don't think, but it was just kind of watching and celebrating, our seniors that year that we had the undefeated team in 1987.
What year was it when you got into the starting lineup? You had the big block in the spring. Like, were you a freshman, sophomore, junior?
Redshirt sophomore. So that was my third year. So had come in and been redshirted my first year. They redshirted our entire class. So it was just, let's redshirt these guys and we'll evaluate and get ready. So we had several guys that got onto the field as contributors our redshirt freshman year. I was a special teams player my redshirt freshman year. And then the spring going into my redshirt sophomore year was when I had the good spring session, and the fullback position was open for competition.
And so your mindset of the kid that hung back on the walk up to Skytop saying, I don't know if I belong here, to that spring, like, was what got you to that point? Was it just living in the weight room and working your tail off, or was there something else that got you, like, where you felt like you were ready to make that jump?
Yeah, there's a handful of people in my life that I wouldn't be where I'm at today had it not been for them. And both of them were a part of that journey. So Mike Wojcik as my strength coach, and Jim Hoffer as my running back coach. And, Mike was there my whole time. So, those first 2 years, just starting to build that foundation, to be able to have the strength and the confidence in a collision game to be able to withstand all that was huge. But the big change, along with kind of that aha moment in the spring, was having Jim and really just looking at my position at that time from a completely different perspective. I kind of lost the joy of football at that time, if that makes sense. It wasn't fun anymore. We all talk about the grind in the game of football. It is a grind, and it's tough, mentally, physically. And after my first 2 years, my love for the game was probably not as strong as it was when I walked on campus. And Jim Hoffer was able to relight that fire for me that spring. And so I would say if I had to really kind of narrow it down to one thing that changed, it would be Jim Hoffer coming onto our staff at Syracuse. And it wasn't just me. We'd go to team meal, and as Jim got to know everybody else on the team, like we had to start putting tables together in the running back area because we had offensive linemen and wide receivers and defensive backs, and everybody wanted to sit down and hang around with Jim and pick Jim's brain. And he's still that way today. I mean, he is a brilliant football mind.
You became known as a fullback who made other people better. When did you first understand that your role was not going to be about getting the most attention?
As soon as we drafted Emmitt Smith, it was funny. In 1989, we were cycling through running backs. I had 16 carries for 64 yards, and Jimmy will tease me a little bit on that. But that was, that's the end of the year. And, I was not drafted. I'm not Mike Allstott. I'm not that, that three quarterback that, can get in a 3-point stance and, be a good lead blocker and then, be able to be handed the football and rush for 1,000 yards. I've never had a 1,000-yard season my entire football career. I'm probably hard pressed to get to 2,000 yards total in my entire football career, high school, college, and professional. And I knew what my skill sets were. I knew what my role was. Syracuse was different. I mean, I was an option fullback, so I had a lot of carries. I was over 500 yards every year as a starter. Maybe that does put me over 2,000 yards. Maybe I'm selling myself short. But it was me just really kind of It's odd because this is the first time I've ever thought of this, and it's probably because we're having the conversation about Jim and we've talked about Norv. But year 3 in college, year 3 in the NFL, there's a change on the offensive staff, and it just changes the course of my life. So Jim Hoffer at Syracuse and Norv Turner in Dallas. So he comes in after the 91 season or after the 90 season. So we've done 89 and 90. He's coming in the spring. We start to see how everything fits in place that we talked about earlier. But that's when the defined roles came in. That's when I knew that I would be more of a blocking back with the opportunity to catch the football, which I was very confident in. I don't think it was demonstrated a lot at Syracuse because we were an option-based offense, and there was not a lot of opportunities for the fullback in the passing game. But I was always confident in my hands, just from growing up playing football in the backyard. I knew how to catch. I knew how to catch properly. It was something that I was very, very confident with in my game. So when I started to see that role along with the blocking component in Norv's offense, I got super, super excited because I really felt that I fit that role really, really well. And so that's a no-brainer. From that point on, once you start to see what Norv Turner's offense is going to be for us in Dallas, I knew my role. I knew who was behind me, and now it's my opportunity to go out and win that role again.
When you got drafted from Syracuse to Dallas, I know the draft was so different. Again, another thing you talked about recruitment being different, the draft. I always ask my dad, like, what was it like as a first round pick when I was growing up? And he's like, it was nothing. I was at home with, my grandparents, his parents. and they called on the phone and said, "Hey, you're going to Atlanta," and there was some local news thing interviewed him. It was like nothing. When you got drafted by Dallas, what was that feeling like? What was that experience like? Were you expecting Dallas? Was it a surprise? How did that all go?
No, it was a complete surprise. We went into the draft actually having a pretty good idea of what was going to happen that day. Don Shula had come out and said, we're going to take the fullback from Syracuse in the second round, which I was very excited about. Not only the fact that I was going to get the opportunity to play football with Dan Marino, but growing up as a kid in Buffalo, New York, I was a bandwagon guy. So actually the Miami Dolphins were my favorite team. So I'm over the moon. I mean, not only am I going to get an opportunity to go to the NFL, but I'm going to get an opportunity to go to the NFL to my favorite team. During the course of the first round, Lewis Oliver, a safety from the University of Florida, starts to drop. And Miami had taken Sammy Smith, I think it's 6th overall in the draft. So they were going to go running back, fullback in the first 2 rounds. Lewis Oliver's dropping, so Miami trades their 2nd round pick and maybe their 3rd round or something, a little bit later to move back into the 1st round and take Lewis Oliver. So that one fell apart. So everybody kind of looks at you and goes, "Okay, what now?" And I said, "Well, I had a really good workout for Washington." And then Washington trades their 2nd round pick to Atlanta for the big running back at the time. Oh, I can't remember his name. But they made that big trade. So they looked at me after that one and they're like, "Well, what next?" And I'm like, "Well, we could be here all afternoon," because those were the only 2 that I felt really, really strong about. And I think a lot of people forget Dallas actually drafted Steve Wisniewski, 1st overall in the 2nd round from Penn State, and then traded him to the Raiders to get the pick that they used to select me. So Dallas kind of came out of the blue a little bit, but Tony Wise, who was going to be the offensive line coach on the staff, was at Syracuse our freshman year. Dave Campo was there for a couple seasons as a defensive back coach, and they were both going to be on Jimmy Johnson's staff. So they knew me as a person, and I had a good pro day at Syracuse. But yeah, I think Dallas kind of came out of left field a little bit for me. And the funny thing for me was how many Dallas Cowboy fans, were in the Syracuse area, and and in my friend group, they were over the moon that I was going to Dallas. So I walked out from the phone call that Tim talked about. You get that phone call and you go into the room and you walk out and everybody was gone. All my friends and family were gone. And I'm like, well, that's odd. And they were all out running around trying to find some Dallas Cowboy gear to put on. And one of the guys was a huge fan, and he's got a jacket and hat and blanket and everything. And I'm like, oh my God, I never knew you were a Cowboy fan. So that finally showed its head on draft.
If you think about the walk up, I keep going back to the walk up after the scrimmage to Skytop with your dad, and you're saying, "I don't know if I belong here." What would that Daryl Johnston have said if you said, "Hey, you're going to be drafted in the 2nd round by the Cowboys"?
Boy, he'd have a long reflection as to what's going to change from right now until that day, and just all those things that we've touched on. It's amazing how people come into your life and have the opportunity to change the direction of what your path was going to be, if you recognize it. So, that was critical for me. My wife Diane will say, "You are divinely led." I mean, it was just so many times at kind of those junction points in your life, that key positive influence has shown up.
2 people helped change what you believed was possible. You and I have another thing in common, a deep respect for Coach Mike Wojcik. Do you feel like he extended your career through the way he trained you?
He extended my career in a number of different ways. Having the neck injury and not being able to go under the bar to squat was probably the thing that made me the most nervous. Squatting was the most important thing I was doing in the weight room, whether it was Syracuse or Dallas. And, we had a number that I wanted to get to every year before we would go to training camp. And that just kind of got me in the right spot mentally. And how was I going to do that? Our last workout of the off season, I was set to do 505 for 5. And I would always tell Mike I wanted to do 505 for 8. And he would let me do it. I petitioned for 10 one time, and he said no. But I felt like I could have got 9 and 10. I was very strong that year. And maybe it was the creatine or the Metrex that we were using. Mike we were so strong and so lean and so fast and so explosive. It just so many different things. But how was Mike going to be able to keep my strength with me not being able to squat and getting to that 505 for 8 before I went into training camp to have that clear head going into the battles? And that was probably the biggest thing. He was able to keep my hamstrings and my glutes strong, but you lose that connectivity between upper and lower body from walking out of the rack with big weight on your shoulders. There's just such a stability and a strength that connects your upper and lower body from that. And I wasn't going to be able to have that anymore. So I was nervous about that. And I felt it on the field. You just, that hip drop and that drive was not there after I wasn't allowed to squat under the bar anymore. I stayed as strong as I could through Mike's genius. But it was just hard. It was just hard to be able to get back to that spot where you were when you could walk out with 505 on the rack and do your reps. So I think one of the great stories that the training staff at Dallas shared with me is the NFL called one year and they said, "Hey, listen, your team is an outlier for ankle injuries to the starters. You lost like 3 games last year to starters due to ankle injuries, and that we just threw the data out because it is so far out on the left side of the bell curve that it doesn't even correlate with the numbers that we have. So what are you guys doing differently down there from a treatment standpoint where you're not losing games to starters due to ankle injuries?" And our trainer's like, "Well, we're not really doing anything differently, but let us get you in touch with Mike Wojcik, because I'm sure the answer lies there more than it does in the training room." And it was really Mike doing all his dynamic movement and functional movement with resistance and no ankles taped. And so throughout the entire off season, we're doing resistive movement with start-stop and hard change of direction with no tape. And so we're just strengthening that ankle joint. And Mike's big problem, his big concern was what happens at the end of the year when we've been taping ankles since mid-July in training camp all the way through the season. That ankle is going to get weaker. That joint will get weaker. And what happens then? And I think 2 of the 3 ankle injuries we had were actually after November. So Mike was just amazing at being able to train the body and prepare it for the rigor of a college season, an NFL season, and allow you to get through it as healthy as you could possibly be.
I know you were a team player and never would complain about it, but was there ever a time in Dallas when you wanted the ball more than your job allowed?
No, there really wasn't. There was one time as Emmett was getting comfortable with NFL protection schemes. I was the third down back, and it was allowing me to have 40 catch seasons. And I actually had a 50 catch season one year. A lot of that was because I was the third down back, because I could do the pass protection component, and it was just a matter of time before Emmett got that down from a mental standpoint, and then developed the physical skills as a pass protector, which I still feel he's never gotten the credit for. If you go back and watch him, he is a really, really good pass protector. And it was kind of that double-edged sword where, he asked me, he's like, hey, how do you do this? How do you group all these protections together? So I shared some secrets with him And some of it was not grouping everything together that the coaches were explaining, because I felt that there were similarities in protections that maybe he didn't lump together. So I just kind of showed him how I was keeping all my protections straight, and, some of the keys you could get, and, how important it was to listen to the offensive line. So you're basically working yourself out of a job. Because who does Troy want to throw the ball to? Me, who, can take a 3rd and 6 and maybe turn it into a first down, or throw it to Emmett, who can take a 3rd and 6 and turn it into a touchdown. So that was one of the areas where, I had kind of created a little niche role for myself, that added to my statistics. And that was probably my biggest test of, okay, yeah, let's do what's best for the team. It's much better to have Emmett on the field on 3rd down than it is to have me on the field on 3rd down. So that was probably the one time. But other than that, it's knowing your role. It's doing that role to the best of your capabilities possible. And I got all my validation from what we accomplished as a team, and the gratitude that Emmett has shown me throughout his entire career. And I know I get a lot of people that come up to me and, oh my gosh, I tears in my eyes, at Emmett's Hall of Fame induction, when he, asked you to stand up. And, that's why you do it, right? And I'm not doing it for that reason. You're doing it because it's your job, but then you get that validation, on a stage like that. And, that meant the world to me. So he's a very special person. He's a very special person, Emmitt Smith.
That selflessness earned respect, but it also demanded something. You blocked for Emmitt Smith while Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, and others became huge names. What did it cost you to be valuable in a way people could not always measure?
That's one of the things that I was always impressed with. I think my nickname, it's any nickname that has Moose or Bruce, or, it has that.
Yeah, those are always the best.
Yeah, right. Fans just love saying it. But there were times that, people came up to me, and you would get into conversations, and, the depth of knowledge that fans have in the game, even back then, I think it's more so today, but even back then they appreciated, kind of that blue collar style, the lunch pail style. And that was always something that I took a lot of pride in. I travel, around the country, and you bump into Philadelphia Eagle fans or old Washington Redskin fans, New York Giant fans, all your big key division rivals. And the nicest compliment that I can ever get from people like that is, I was never a Dallas Cowboy fan, but I always respected the way that you played the game. So, for me, that's the biggest thing, is just having that connection with the person who's a fan of the game of football. They may be a Giants fan, an Eagles fan, a Redskins fan, or a Cowboys fan. And they respect the way that you did your job. They know that it is a dirty job, and they appreciate how well you did it. So that has always been something that's been very, very meaningful to me.
Deservedly so, you became a crowd favorite. When the crowd started chanting Moose, did that feel like respect, pressure, or something else?
Never pressure. Always respect. Always respect. The funny times would be if we were down close to the goal line, and it would start when we were in the huddle. Emmett looked at me one time in the huddle. He's like, "Oh my God, seriously?" He goes, "They're calling for you to get the touchdown," and I'm like, "Well, I mean, how many times do you get a touchdown?" Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a nice little, persuasive move there right before Troy calls the play. So that would always get a little bit of a chuckle between the two of us in the huddle. But it was never based on pressure. Always respect. Always respect. And I tell you what, I do. All those Cowboy fans, I would hear it at the vet. I would hear it at Giant Stadium. I would hear it at RFK. I'd hear it at Candlestick. Those are some places that it's a little bit risky, to be cheering for the visiting team. So always respected, those fans probably, taking their health into their own hands. Being a vocal fan of the Dallas Cowboys on enemy turf.
What was the moment when those early Cowboys teams stopped hoping they could win and started knowing they should win?
Oh, I bet you we would probably all have a different time. For me, I think one of the under the radar games is at RFK. The Redskins are 11-0. We're 6-5, and we were able to hold on and knock off Washington on the road that day. So Troy Aikman got hurt in that game. We went down the stretch with Steve Berline as our starting quarterback. And that team never wavered. And we ended up winning our final 5 games and finishing 11-5, and beat Chicago in the playoffs, but then lost to Detroit in the divisional round. So for me, that game has always been meaningful and impactful because that was a really good Washington team. I being from the Buffalo area and Buffalo going to 4 straight Super Bowls. I always tell everybody, the best opportunity for you to win that championship was the first game against the Giants because you'd beaten them handily in mid-December. But that had some good and some bad things to it because Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick were going to know exactly, where they needed to fix matchups and what they needed to do to be able to knock you guys off the second time in the Super Bowl. But to run into the Washington team in 91 and then our 92 and 93 teams, that's a tough. Those are 3 really good teams. Not to take anything away from the Giants in 1990, but that was a team Buffalo had beaten in December. So that to me was a great victory on the home field of the potential, or not the potential, the team that won the Super Bowl that year handily. So that was an eye opener for me. And then we got into that 92 season, and I think a lot of people felt we were still a younger team, on the upswing, but were we a championship caliber team yet? Probably not at the beginning of the season, but as the season wore on, we got better and better. And that was something that I remember. We scrimmaged the Raiders in training camp. They'd come down before their preseason game, and we'd practice together. The practices were much harder than the games. And I remember talking to Ronnie Lott during that 92 season, and he remarked the growth of your team from when we practiced with you at training camp until now when we played you is amazing. He goes, you guys were good, during camp. You could see some of the talent there, but the team that we played on the field today is not that same team. So there was a tremendous growth, probably on all levels, skill, confidence, everything. And that 92 team just got better and better and better. So I think the 91 game at RFK, 6-5 versus 11-0, showed what we could be. And then, being able to win the rest of the games down the stretch and get into the playoffs, and then just another great offseason, getting ready for that 92 year, and everybody really kind of taking some quantum leaps individually, which translates into the group, which translates into the team.
When Jimmy Johnson left the Cowboys, what changed inside the building that fans could not see?
I think the biggest change from Jimmy to Barry was the discipline, and it comes from 2 different thoughts by a head coach, and one Jimmy had already walked that path back in 1989 and learned his lesson. We had a pretty productive preseason in 1989. I think we went 3-1. I think our only loss was to the Broncos, and if memory serves me correct, they brought John Elway off the bench in the fourth quarter to win the game. So we felt pretty good about ourselves going into the opener. All being young, a lot of people on our staff, first time in the NFL. We went down to New Orleans and got thumped 28-0. Did not block well, did not tackle well, did not do anything well from a fundamental standpoint in the game of football. And when we got back, Jimmy told us, I reached out to people coming to Dallas, and they told me it's different than the college game, and you've got grown men, and some of them are married and have families, and you got to watch that college rah-rah stuff, and the discipline and the heavy-handedness of a coaching style, and you got to respect these guys, and they're grown men. And Jimmy said, I believed them, and yesterday I saw where that got me. So on Wednesday, we're going to go back to doing things the way I think they should be done. And that's going to be much different than the way we've been doing things up until now. So just get ready. And from that point on, we saw the way that we were going to do things under Jimmy Johnson. And it was physical. It was competitive. And that was his aha moment. And when Barry came in, Barry kind of had that same style that Jimmy had used through training camp and up until that opener in 89, and kind of he didn't have that aha moment. And we're all little kids in big bodies, and we're going to press the rules as much as we can. So the disciplinary component and the accountability component was not as strong with Barry, because I think Barry had that initial thought that Jimmy did. We're grown men. We'll be able to regulate ourselves and follow the rules, and you got to have a little bit of a thumb on top of guys, and keep that accountability and keep that discipline there. So when Jimmy left the building, I think that was probably the biggest thing that left. And it was a very difficult position for Barry Switzer to be put into, because he was coming in as the head coach, and nobody else was coming in with him. There was no people that he had selected to be a part of his staff, whether it was people from his past or people that he respected and had never worked with, but thought they were excellent coaches. He didn't have that opportunity. So it was a tough situation for him to walk into, which translated to us as a team, a tough situation for us, to function in.
Beyond the coaching change, the locker room had its own chemistry. You played with some of the biggest personalities in football. Who was most different when the cameras were gone?
That's one of the funny ones. I think everybody thinks it's Michael Irvin, because you just can't be that guy all the time, but he is that guy all the time. So I don't think anybody was doing it as a persona. I think they were authentic and genuine. That's who they are. There was nobody that became somebody different when the lights came on and the cameras were switched on. And I can't tell you how many people I have asked me, is Michael Irvin really like that all the time? And I'm like, yes, he is. That is Michael 24/7, high energy, big smile. He's unbelievable. That's why when he was out of the lineup, we were nowhere close to being the same team, because you had just taken the emotional heart and soul from our team. And sidelined him. Usually he had sidelined himself, but every once in a while, if he had an injury and he was not able to play, but when he was suspended and it was his fault that he was not on the field, that was kind of the time that we had to, just individually have conversations with him. And hey, Mike, we're not the same without you in the huddle. There was nothing I liked more than to look to my right and see 88 there. It was a calming effect. And just in the biggest moments of the game, the confidence that he had, just dead in the eyes of Troy, just throw me the ball. I got you. So you want your greatest players to have their greatest moments in the biggest games, and Michael was like that. And in the biggest moments, he wanted the football. And there's that great story when we have the big play in San Francisco in the divisional or the conference championship game, at the end of the '92 season. And he makes Alvin Harper switch positions because the way that San Francisco had been defending that play, Michael thought the route that was going to be open was the 6 route, the curl route on the front side. And it was actually going to be the skinny on the backside is where the ball went. And that's where Michael was supposed to be. But because he thought it was going to the other side, he switches. And that's why Alvin Harper has the big catch and run on that play, which we always tease Michael. Alvin was faster than you, so it probably worked out better that he was the guy who caught the ball. But that's, he wanted, that was such a huge drive. San Francisco had fought back. The game had gotten tight. We had lost a lot of the momentum. We were +4 in the turnover ratio in that game, and we were hanging on by a thread at the end of that game. So that drive was huge, and that was the first play call. That's 1st and 10. And Norv Turner, calls the play, and Troy makes a great read and throws the skinny post, and the rest is history. But that was supposed to be Michael on the skinny post because Michael doesn't run the curl on the front side.
You said that Michael's the hardest working guy on the team. And you said he's kind of the life and blood of the team. Was he also the most gifted, just pure athlete, or was there somebody else that you think had him in that category?
Wow, that's a great question. The drive that Michael had, the hardest worker on the team, the reason he has that moniker is because he felt he wasn't as good as all the other receivers in the NFL at that time. Yeah, Sterling Sharp and Herman Moore and Jerry Rice and John Taylor. It was a hell of a group of wide receivers across the NFL, and Michael worked as hard as he did because he felt he didn't deserve to be in that level that they were at. So he was working to make sure he could be there, not to stay there. He just felt I got to get there first before I can stay there. So that was a tremendous motivation. Just God given. Dion was one of the freakier athletes that I've been around, and is Tim and I have talked about what Mike Wojcik was able to do for us. Mike would always tell Dion, I can make you faster, I can make you stronger, I can make you more explosive if you just give me the chance. And it would have been interesting to see if they would have had the opportunity to work hard in the weight room together. But Larry Allen, probably somebody that you saw on a football field that would do stuff that you shouldn't see on an NFL football field. There's whether it's the interception in the right flat and he's playing left tackle and takes an angle and runs the guy down to his 700-pound bench press. He was an incredible athlete. You watch game tape on Monday and you'd see things that you didn't expect to see at the NFL level because the talent had, shrinks. It's pretty even. And then you get a guy like that and you just see how his talent stands out, his strength, his explosiveness. It was very, very unique.
Yeah. Yeah, Coach George O'Leary was my dad's coach, then coached me for a year at UCF. He used to talk about every team needs like a ratio. He said the unicorns are the blue chip talents that work like they're a walk-on. Those are the unicorns that everybody wants. But it's like all this ratio. You need chip on their shoulder guys who are willing to be the fullback for an Emmitt Smith, right? But you also need the Deion Sanders. Like you need the mix of that. And that's, again, you mentioned one of the first things you said is the beauty of football. One of the beauties, like the team sport aspect of it, is it really does take a whole team to do it. Even when you have those freak athlete guys, if you don't have the right ratio of selfless guys to block or to make the tackle or to fill the gap, whatever it might be, none of it works.
Yeah. I think it's one of the reasons why, sometimes is it a talented team or is it a talented side of the ball? Because I think that's another big one is, how do you blend that? Can one carry the other? Are you good enough? So I always tell people the reason the reason that football is the greatest team sport. There's no other sport that turns over a part of the game to 11 players and trusts them to go do their job. And either as a defense, stop the opposing offense, or as an offense, go down and score some points. And then you also turn it over to a mixture of offensive and defensive and special teams players that do their role. And so there's this very unique thing. I mean, in baseball, you're playing the field and you're batting. In basketball, you're playing offense and defense. In hockey, you're playing offense and defense. In soccer, you're playing offense and defense. In football, you're turning the game over to your teammates. So I think that dynamic in the game of football is what makes it so unique, and why I don't think anybody can call it anything other than the greatest team sport ever, because no other sport has that trust component to turn that portion of the game over to members of their team. And that's why you hear so much talk about culture. You hear so much talk about, building the intangibles to go along with the talent. And so to George's point, having the unicorns and the walk-ons, the lunch pail guys, the glue guys, whatever you want to call them, that's what binds the three phases together. And they're critical. They're critical. And again, not just doing your job, but doing your job better than anybody else can.
Emmitt Smith has given you a lot of credit for what you did for his career. When you heard that, what did it mean to you privately?
It's funny. So we'll go back to when he broke Walter Payton's rushing record. So I was working for Fox, and I had talked to Ed Gorn and David Hill at the time and said, I'd like to be there when Emmitt breaks the record if that's cool. And they were like, absolutely. So, just let us know when you think it's going to happen. So they were playing Seattle at home, and I think they had three road games in a row after that game. I think the first one, which if he just falls short, was in Detroit. So he's going to be in Barry Sanders' home stadium breaking the record. How odd is that going to be? So I just kind of had that feeling that this was going to be the Sunday he was going to do it. And it was against Seattle. Seattle was at Dallas. And so we made the switch, and I got to work with Pat Summerall and do that game. And I remember walking into the production meetings with Seattle, and Chad Brown, the outside linebacker, he saw me sitting there. He's like, "Oh, so you think he's going to do it this weekend?" And I'm like, I'm not a negative on you guys, but I got a feeling, and there's some other reasons why, if you would like to hear my theory. But it was a fun conversation, and the first run of the game, I mean, he's out the gate. So it started off really positive, and then he had a little bit of a lull there. I remember they had gotten me down to the sidelines, to make sure that we could capture the moment. And then Seattle's defense really started playing well, and they were stuffing them for 0 and no gain and some negatives. And but he was able to kind of get it done that day, and that was a magical one. It's hard for me to choose which one was more meaningful for us, because people will say, why did you come back from your neck injury? Why did you try to come back and play again? And me being selfish and not being respectful of my wife, who's watching every game, my mom, who's watching every game, I was a little bit selfish and wanted to be there when Emmitt broke the record. So when my career ended, this for me was going to be the next best thing. And man, we had a moment. I can't thank Fox enough for making the switch and allowing me to be there. I mean, it was better than I ever could have imagined. So he breaks Walter's record, and we get a huge hug on the sideline, and both teary. So the one at the Hall of Fame was great because of the platform that was on, and just being in Canton. Canton is such a special place when you talk about the game of football with the Hall of Fame. And so for him to recognize me at that event in front of those people, the Hall of Fame class, on stage, the new guys coming in, that was awesome. But, that day he broke the record. That's another really, really special one.
You've got that. We talked about it a little bit before we started recording. You've got that picture behind you. Can you tell that story quickly?
Yeah. It was a Christmas present. So, he'd gotten, Vernon Wells is the artist that did them. So he had gotten paintings for everybody for Christmas on the offense that started. And that was the one that he got for me. Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Just like meaningful things like that, right? Not just you hear some of the Christmas presents today from the guys, and there's thought put into it. I think everybody does a great job. All these guys, just so the guys know how much they appreciate everything they do for them in their careers. But that one there, that's kind of next level, because that's a lot of thinking ahead of time. You're not gonna knock out a bunch of portraits painted for a group of guys on a football team unless you got a lot of thought put into that, and you are way ahead of the curve. I'm FedExing on Christmas Day with my Christmas present, so I've never been to a pool.
You played through a lot of punishment. When did pain stop feeling like part of the job and start feeling like a warning?
Gosh, you ask good questions. Right? Injuries are a part of the game of football, and you never feel 100% after that first day of training camp. We had a home game on a Monday night, and I just didn't feel right. Something didn't feel right, and I went to my chiropractor when we had a little bit of a break in the day on Monday to get some work done, and was able to get through that. But that was probably the first time that the pain felt different. I had incidents where I had lost strength. I went in the the weight room, and Mike thought I was kidding around. I was getting ready to warm up, and I took 135 pounds off, the bench, and got stuck underneath it. And I'm like, "Hey, Mike, can you help me get this off?" And he's like, "Quit screwing around and get it off your chest." I said, "No, I can't. I don't know why. I've got nothing in my left arm right now." So that was different. Then we were playing the Giants, and it was funny. I give Matt Millen a ton of credit because he saw this on film. He walked up to me pregame, and he said, "What's going on?" Nothing. Everything's good. No. What's going on with you from a health standpoint? I said, "Nothing. Everything's good." He's like, "No." He goes, "I'm watching you on tape, and you were blocking completely different. Everything's different. You're cutting more. You're using your right shoulder more." So he'd actually seen it on film, and in that game, I had a crack block to seal the edge, and I got one of the worst burners I've ever had in my life. Well, let's just the worst burner I've ever had in my life, and that was probably the one where, okay, let's take all these incidents together and add them up. I've got something going on that is no longer pain, and it's not only an injury, but seems to be a substantial injury.
When the neck injury came back, what was the first you were afraid you might lose?
The journey back was so hard, which again kind of emphasizes why did I put my wife and family and friends through all that. The first year I was not playing at the level I held myself accountable to. And again, I don't know if it was what we talked about with Mike Wojcik and the squatting and me not being in the right space mentally because I couldn't do something that gave me the confidence to be able to do my job on the field. It's just 98 after the injury was hard. It happened in October I had the surgery in October of 97. So to go into camp and go into the season and really not have your strength back yet totally, probably mentally was not a great spot for me to be in, and did not play well in 98. Not happy at all how I played in 98. Then, being able to get, a whole nother year distance between the injury and the recovery and the rehab and the training, felt much better going into the 99 season. And I think the hard part was it only lasted one game. So you had worked, that hard and that long. And I got hurt in the opener, and it was the first time I'd had another burner since the surgery. I lost a little bit of strength again. So I did not have a good feeling going into the MRI. And when the doctor came back, he said, "Remember that conversation we had after your surgery, that if you hurt your neck again, we weren't going to fight this. We were going to call it quits and move on." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, today's that day." So it was tough to hear. It was tough to hear. I think, especially because of the timing, I felt so much better going into 99 than I did going into 98. That it was real deflating to get that news.
Did you think about trying to go somewhere else and trying to get surgery or anything like that, or just no chance?
No, that was my promise to my doctor. That was Drew Dossett, who I respect the hell out of. That was our handshake, and he told me that. He goes, "You'll be able to get cleared. Somebody's going to clear you to play." He goes, "But when we do this, I want you to understand that if we get to this point again, you'll promise me that you'll retire." And I said, "I'll do that. I promise that if we get to this point again in the future, that I will retire." Because the quality of life you're going to have if you're going to have a double fusion now, blocking 1, 2, 3, 4, I can't ski, a car accident is very serious for me. So there's a lot of things that would have changed your life at that time. So it was time to hang up the cleats. It had been a great run. To your point, thinking back to that young kid walking down the sidewalk at Syracuse University, and then getting to that point, who would have thought that? So
Yeah.
what a run. What a run. So, yeah.
If you had stayed healthy there, how many more years do you think you had in the tank?
That's why I give Lorenzo Neal so much credit. I think he's done 16 at that position. And you look at the guys that Lorenzo's blocked for, how successful they've been as running backs behind him. It is a violent physical position. And I was hurt in the opener of my 11th season, and he finished 16. And I think is relatively healthy right now, which is just amazing, because when you watch how he played the position, there's no other way to play the position. I mean, you don't find this new way to play the fullback position where you avoid all the collisions. They're just a part of that position. So I'm always amazed at the level of play of Lorenzo Neal throughout his career. I don't know how many more I could have done. I don't know, and I think it's always kind of that. Would your body have broke down physically, or would it have just been too hard mentally to keep trying to get ready to go into the games on Sunday and play at that level that you hold yourself accountable to?
It's funny too. It's like the never enough, right? 11 seasons. You wish I wish I could have had that 12th. We talked about this exact same thing with Troy Aikman actually on the podcast. In his episode, he talked about, I don't remember how he got there, but he was talking about like the top quarterbacks, and he was saying how, like, if he had been in an offense that threw it more, he thinks he would have got more respect from the fans, and he still wouldn't have traded. He had a great career and all that. And I was just sitting there laughing to myself because, Troy Aikman, a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback, 3-time Super Bowl champion, saying, well, if only this, right? And then my dad was responding back like he was supposed to get drafted by the Cowboys or the Giants or the two teams, and they both ended up winning Super Bowls. And if only, and I'm sitting here going, you guys are first round NFL draft pick, Troy's Hall of Fame, won 3 Super Bowls. It's still not, it's never enough.
No.
It's never, if you had told me when I was little, I looked at college football players like they were gods. Like we would go to the Syracuse practices. My dad would go to be talking to the team, whatever. And I remember watching them on the field, like, holy crap, look at the size of these guys and the bright orange helmets and the pop of the pads. And then like, I got there and I'm like, I wish like things could have gone different. I played in the NFL. Then you go, my dad, first round NFL draft pick, college football Hall of Fame. If only I could have won that Super Bowl. Then it's like, if even Troy is saying it's never, he's saying, oh, if only as a Hall of Famer 3 times through, that's the downside about sports. It's what makes it so fun, but it's just like a drug.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is an individual player. Like when people ask you, it's like kind of those moments where you faltered. Stick at the front of your brain more than all the great things you accomplished.
Sure.
I was fortunate enough to have one of the better games of my career in the '92 NFC Championship game in San Francisco. And the one thing that haunts me is I dropped a pass on a whip route, and it would have given me 2 touchdowns in the NFC Championship game, and I never scored 2 touchdowns in any other game in my entire career, and it would have been on the biggest, one of the biggest stages of football, and that one always gets under my skin. I remember people saying that, I don't think Troy Aikman's a first ballot Hall of Famer. It's like, what? I mean, are you serious? Well, he doesn't have the statistics that these other quarterbacks have. So I'll give you 3 that,
Yeah, exactly.
that a lot of the quarterbacks don't have. And just, that first Super Bowl, he's the MVP. I mean, he put his flag in the ground on what he was to one of the more talented dynastic teams in football history. I mean, he was the clear-cut leader and the alpha male on that team.
I know what it's like when your body starts making decisions for you. When football ended, what part of yourself was hardest to replace?
Very thoughtful questions, Tim. Very thoughtful questions. Yeah, what part of myself was hardest to replace? Hopefully, I've done a good job where football didn't define who I was. So as I moved on into the next phase of my life, I was able to replace that as a father who was going to be around more, as a husband who was going to be around more. It is daunting, and it's one of the things for the NFL to take a look at. That's a scary transition, and I think we lose a lot of our NFL brothers in that transition when the career ends, because it ends so abruptly. Whether it's by injury or age or the perception of being able to get somebody else better to do your job, that career can end pretty quickly. And yeah, you do struggle to find your identity. Okay, who am I going to be now? You're relatively young, 34, 35 years old, and you've got to go out and reinvent yourself. So that's a daunting task. It's a daunting task. I leaned on family probably the most, and that's why I've had a lot of people say, "Why didn't you get into coaching?" It seems like you would have been a good coach. We had just started our family at the time, and I didn't want to be away from my family a lot. And I know how hard coaches work and how much time they're away from their wives and their kids. And if I could do broadcasting, I thought that would be something that kept me in contact with the game of football, but also allow me time with my family, which was the most important thing.
When you moved into broadcasting, did it feel like a new career or like standing just outside the life you used to have? I remember that being a strange feeling for me. Yes,
I felt exactly the way you did. The weirdest thing is the end of the game, and there is no win or lose. It's a very subjective craft, and there were people that liked my broadcast because I was a Dallas Cowboy, and there were people who didn't like my broadcast because I was a Dallas Cowboy. So it was really challenging, kind of coming to peace with a lot of those odd things that you never thought of. I mean, there was nothing better than being a player and winning and being able to go back and look at the things that you didn't do well, but still found a way to win the game, and then also accentuate the things that you did do well. Or when you lose, okay, why did we lose? How do we prevent this sick, gut wrenching feeling from ever happening again? You just don't have that. I mean, I tell everybody there's a reflective period after a football game where everybody's in the locker room and you're either excited about the win or you're very kind of introspective about your role and how did we lose, and there's time to kind of reflect on it. And when you're a broadcaster, it's a jailbreak until you get to the airport, so you don't miss your flight. I miss that work of fixing what went wrong, and having, I mean, the evidence is all there, right? The scoreboard tells you, the film the next day is going to tell you. And in broadcasting, you have that. When you weren't as good as you wanted to be in a moment. The little mistakes you make throughout the course of a broadcast. You do have that. And I think everybody who's been good at that in their career, kind of attacks it the same way. But it's so much different. And I think the way that you explained it, standing on the outside of the game, you're a part of it, but you are definitely on an outer ring, and it's a very different feeling and role to get comfortable with.
Did you ever watch a game and think, I mean, I'm sure you missed it, but did you watch and like have an itch to come out of retirement, or you were just dead set on not coming back?
No, mine was easy. The neck injury made mine easier. So I'm done. There's no way I'm coming back. I don't know if Troy shared this one with you when he was on, but we worked together his first year out. So it was my second year, his first year, and we worked together at Fox with Dick Stockton. And we were doing an Eagles game, and Donovan got hurt, and Andy Reid was calling him to see what his thoughts were to play for the Philadelphia Eagles. So Troy wrestled with it a couple of times. I can see why too, and not because of what he shared with you. Oh my gosh, there's so many things I wish I could have done. But look at all the great things that you did do. Sometimes the hardest thing about football is very rarely does it end on your terms. It always ends on somebody else's terms. So who have we had? John Elway, Jerome Bettis. There's a handful. I think there's like 4 of them that always kind of come up in this conversation of
Right.
the perfect exit from their playing career into their next career. That was kind of scripted, in a way where there was a little bit of control by them, where the majority of us, really have no say in it. It kind of gets determined by, other factors. So I think that's probably something that Troy thought about a little bit, was maybe getting back and ending things on his terms as opposed to the game's terms or the business terms.
Even that though, it's never, if you end on a Super Bowl win, people are like, oh, just one more. You're at the peak of your career. It never works perfect, but
No, yeah, exactly. Nobody's going to write a perfect script in real life. So, just and even when you can't control it. I mean, how do I complain? Oh my God, your career was cut short by a neck injury. Don't you wish you could have played longer? I'm like, oh my God, look what we did. I was going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, being able to recognize your opportunity to be a part of something potentially historical. That is the only regret I have, is sitting on the cusp of an opportunity to do something that nobody's done before, and we lose Jimmy. That's one that's, maybe we can win 3 in a row and do something that nobody's done before. But it was going to be hard to do that without Jimmy.
yeah, Troy did bring that up a couple of times, that him leaving really changed the dynamic of the team, and it was a lot bigger blow than people realized.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, it's one of the big reasons, he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. It's funny, people will come out and they'll find reasons why people shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. And, there's a lot of things that are kind of intangibles. And that's one of the big ones there for Jimmy is just, what he meant. And I think the other thing is just, his evaluation skills as a talent evaluator. The trade for Herschel Walker. I mean, there's so many things that he did that were, very unique and revolutionary. Kind of that trade ratio. Who gets the better end of a trade deal when somebody proposes a trade to you? And he kind of came up with a formula there as well. So put some good stuff into the NFL game.
Yeah, my dad would always say to me when I was younger and playing growing up, he'd say like, you have to get lucky. Like no matter how hard you work, you have to get lucky. And I used to say like, oh no, that's BS. And but he like all the way down to injuries, to the coaches you have, to the teammates you have, to the time period you're playing in. Like it really is funny how it really has to be the perfect storm for things to go well.
Yes, and it's weird that I waited so long to be a believer in the window theory. I think it gets kicked around a little bit more today when we talk about that young quarterback that you don't have to pay the big salary to, and he becomes the Joe Burrow or he becomes the Patrick Mahomes. So you've got this window where you've got this incredibly talented quarterback, and you can supplement all the other key positions with big talent and take a shot. For us, there was a window. I mean, everything I shared with you, I could see the potential of this group coming together, especially when Norv got there. Well, you were part of a window. So, why did it take me so long to be a believer in the window theory of the potential to win a championship when I'm one of the people that lived in a window team? We had a small window there. And my biggest question is if free agency doesn't come in, how much does that window get extended? If Jimmy and we did lose Jimmy, but we lost Norv and we lost Dave Wanstead and Tony Wise, and we were losing players and coaches and free agencies coming in. I mean, there were so many different things that impacted that team. How big could that window have been if everything stayed status quo? And I think that's one thing that people forget about. When you become really, really good, other teams are looking for your coaches and looking for your players. So, you have those great moments when everything is together, and that window is in the early stages where, you can't miss those opportunities. You can't have, those games that slip through your fingers.
Yeah. And then the windows of people like the Patriots, it's like you had Brady making a lot less money than he could have because he wanted to stay competitive and wanted to be winning those championships. I remember seeing, I can't remember the year it was, but he was taking like pretty substantial pay cuts. Like he was like, I can't remember the year, but he was like in the bottom half the league of paid quarterbacks or something like that. And he was Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So, but obviously it worked.
Or the flip side of that, when you catch the quarterback in the contract year that wins the Super Bowl, a Drew Brees.
Sure.
Who was the other one? Joe Flacco. I think Eli Manning. It's tough when you pay that big contract. That swing tackle is no longer there. That fourth receiver is no longer there. That
Sure.
fifth corner is no longer there, or fourth corner or nickel corner. So, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to stay on top, and that it's so odd to me that it took me so long to really kind of be a believer in that window theory when I was part of a window myself. Back for a different reason, right? It wasn't because of a quarterback on a rookie contract and we've got an opportunity. It was because we had a group of guys together and free agency is looming. And what are we going to do before people have the ability to start taking players from our team?
Was there anything you learned in the booth that you wished you knew as a player?
I don't think so. We had really good coaches. We were really well prepared. As the game has evolved, from when I played to what it is now, there's some things that are a little bit different. But I think if you really dig into it, there are some of the concepts that were a part of the game when we were playing, Tim, that have just been kind of rehashed in a different way, whether that's through formations and motions and personnel groups, but you're still kind of getting back to some of the core things of the game of football. I think the biggest thing for me is, when I played, secondaries and coverages were pretty basic and fundamental, and you kind of knew exactly what were the core elements that team was going to play, and not necessarily just on the back end, but in the front as well. I think the big thing today is how complex the defenses are. That's been something that's really kind of, you watch it grow over the years. I mean, what Steve Spagnuolo's doing with Kansas City and some of the safety rotations and the disguising that they have. That was a great one for me, was doing a Philadelphia game, and I chose my words poorly with Jim Johnson, and I said, I called one of his coverages unsound that he was doing, or one of his schemes unsound, and he was writing, and he just looked up at me and he goes, "I don't do anything that's unsound." He goes, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, you've got Brian Dawkins walked up into the A gap as a blitzer, and you're playing cover 2. He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Who are we playing against?" He goes, "A divisional opponent?" And I said, "Yeah, I think it was. I think it was the Giants." He goes, "Okay, we know their cadence, and Brian knows their cadence, so he knows when to get out." He goes, "Did anybody throw the ball over his head in cover 2?" And I'm like, "No."
It's a lot easier when you have Brian Dawkins too, right?
And so that was a big learning moment for me, when you have somebody as creative and as talented as Jim Johnson as your defensive coordinator. Never call anything that he's doing unsound. And that to me opened the door for just how athletic some of these guys were. And when you have that unique guy, whether it's a Troy Polamalu or Brian Dawkins, when you've got these very unique secondary players and they can give you a look, but they're actually playing something that's completely different, and you don't think they can play it from their start pre-snap, that's awesome. And that's some of the stuff that I see going on today. It's just how well the staffs utilize the unique skills of some of these players.
Then you moved from analyzing football to building it. When you helped to build spring football leagues, what did you learn about players who are still chasing one more chance?
Oh, man, I tell you, the guys in spring football, just some of the best people you meet. Again, incredible passion for the game. Very grateful for the opportunity that you're providing them. It was really meaningful for me, and that's to change the trajectory of a young man's life. We were able to do that for multiple guys, coming through the spring and getting them back into the NFL, and that's coming through COVID and some of the craziness that was going on, and guys that just kind of got lost in the shuffle there. But a Brandon Aubrey and a Cavante Turpin in Dallas that have gone on to sign life-changing contracts. Jalen Redmond up in Minnesota signed a big contract. And to be able to be a part of the group that provided that platform for him to be able to have another opportunity to continue to play the game they love, for whatever reason it was, that got him into that spot where they had to come back, kind of backdoored a little bit. It was great. It was great. They were awesome guys to work with. The biggest thing for us was, the head coaches, and making sure we got people that really could help them and network and all the different things. So there was so much energy from everybody involved, on the football side, on the business side, in every department. It was amazing. You talk about everybody rowing in the same direction. That was one of the more enjoyable things outside of an actual team, where you're working in an environment where everybody is rowing the same way. It was a blast. It was a blast to be a part of. It really was. It was fun. It was fun.
In the UFL, there was tension with players over pay, media days, and trust. Looking back, is there anything you wish you had handled differently?
No, no. I think, the biggest thing is you wanted more for him, but the most important thing was to be available for him. And we always talked about crawl, walk, run. And we had lengthy, deep conversations with our coaches, with our players, everybody involved in the football landscape about things hey, we'd love to be able to do this for you, but we can't. The most important thing for us is to be viable next year, to be able to do this all over again. That was kind of our, we were finish the season, survive, and get ready for the next one. And where can we be better? And we were always, cost cutting, and not cost cutting to a point. That was a big decision on a lot of different topics. Is how much does it cost, and how important is it, and being really, really smart with those key things. So, I thought we did a really, really good job, and I think from where we were in year one with the USFL in Birmingham with all 8 teams, and that's all budget driven. We're not traveling, where everybody's right there. We're stressing our entire staff. Our strength coach, Zach Woodfin, is doing, all 8 teams, down there. So, that's crazy. We were skeleton staffs across the board. There were really no defined roles. There were no defined titles. It was get your job done and then go help out and make sure we're successful at this. And we had a tremendous group. Now, even during that first year, we were able to get our roster. Gosh, what were the numbers when we started out? Were we at 45 and we got it to 50, or we were 43 and got it to 48? But we were able to get like 5 guys added to the roster, like midpoint of the season, because the heat was coming in. And, our coaches came to us and we did a big presentation to our bosses, and this will be expenses up front, will probably pay off in the long run. So there were things that we were able to do. So, I think the guys were always grateful. And we had open conversations, and, from the coaches, from the players, where can we be better? What do you think is a priority? Don't give me your wants, give me your needs. There's a lot of things that we all want, but what do we need to be successful? And that was probably the biggest thing. And it was just the open lines of communication that we were able to create. And we didn't have decisions being made in a vacuum. We were gathering as much information as possible, involving as many people, trying to break down the silos that would pop up from time to time, and making sure that, we had everybody involved. So I think we did a really good job. And did you want to provide more for them? Sure. But we were not doing anything that I think warranted a union. And that was one of the hard things, is it would have been nice for the union to come to us and maybe have a conversation and see what our thoughts were on. And then if they want to try and do things, but we always felt that they circumvented the league, and it wasn't done in a proper way. And that's when you have a league that is, the potential of the success is going to be correlated very strongly to deficits and expenses. A lot of that stuff starts to add up, and we were very good from a medical standpoint. I don't think there was there. If you would, I would love to hear the players' perspective on this. Was there anything there that you felt warranted unionizing, where we're not providing certain things for you, knowing that we couldn't do salaries a certain way? And the salaries were able to bump up a little bit, but we were bumping up the guys who were traveling, and we were holding steady the guys who were inactive. So we were creating a gap that was something that we tried to narrow. We tried to narrow that gap. So the guys who were there, busting their butt and were on the inactive roster, were being penalized financially, is severely. And that was one of the things when you start to elevate salaries. Sometimes it's just the active players whose salaries are going up. Can we lift everybody up? Can it be a high tide situation where we raise all boats? And that's hard. That's a hard one to get done. So, yeah, I really feel strongly that we did a nice job. I really do. And the guys were always very courteous and grateful to us. But I think, for me, it'd be a great after action report after being there for 4 years, to hear where some of the players, feel we could have been a little bit better. And we did do that. There was, you see the senior leadership on teams, but we had guys that we trusted, across our league where we could go and get, some thoughtful reflection on after the season.
Do you think that spring football can ever be a thing? I mean, I don't know if it could ever be what fall football is, but do you think the spring football could be a viable, growing, thriving thing and kind of second option, or is it just too much of an uphill battle?
It's an uphill battle, but I think it's needed. Can it be successful? That's they're still telling that story right now. But with what's going on in college and the developmental component of the player, how quickly the NFL is forced to move on. I mean, we tell our guys all the time, you got to grab their eyes, first snap you're on the field, get those eyes on you, because you're not going to have a lot of opportunity. You're not going to have a lot of days before they've got to start moving on to getting their group together. You hear a lot that there's, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 5 spots on a roster going into training camp. It might even be less than that. So it's going to be hard for you. So you've got to catch those eyes early in training camp. And so I don't think we see the player developed in the details as much, just because there's not enough time. We just don't have the time in the off season, in training camp. Football's still a game of collisions. We got to be in pads and we got to work hard. And I think you see some of the teams that are really pushing that envelope in the NFL. This is what we're affording to you, and those guys are right up against that wall. The good teams are in pads as much as they can be, and they're pushing those practices. You're already hearing it about John Harbaugh with the Giants, and it's a little bit different than it's been in the past, and that's John Harbaugh. So I think when you talk about that shows you the necessity for a spring football league to be able to develop. Do you need to have a relationship with the NFL for it to be successful? If you go back and look, that NFL Europe, that was a pretty good league. Had some support from the NFL. I think that would be, that would be a huge plus. It's hard to bear those expenses as investors, and when you've got one group paying the bills, those are some big checks to write, and for the NFL to be able to step in for the quality of the game, I think would be incredibly helpful, because we always talked, if we could ever get to that relationship, it would not be, hey, you're going down and you're playing in the spring and no questions asked. It would be, would you like to go down and play in the spring and get some game reps? And everybody needs game reps. That, I mean, the game moves so fast, and if you haven't played at NFL speed and had that opportunity, it is different than training camp. It is different than OTAs. I mean, it is a different monster. It's like that whole thing when Jimmy did that opening game in New Orleans and we got thumped 28-0. That was a different tempo. That was a different physicality. The regular season is a regular season, and NFL football speed is something that you have not seen before until you actually experience it. And is spring going to be at that speed? No, but it's going to be faster, and it's going to force you to think and react, in real time at a speed that you haven't been at in an NFL training camp or an NFL OTA.
The fullback position has changed so much throughout football history. Do you have 2 or 3 favorites?
Oh, yeah. That's probably why I was a Miami Dolphin fan growing up in Western New York. Larry Zonka. And then got to go to his alma mater. So, he's always been my favorite. I've gotten to meet him a couple of times. Actually have a football right over there signed by Larry, which is one of my favorite things. What Matsui did for Walter Payton, that's meaningful to me because of my relationship with Emmett. Rocky Blyer, kind of being multifaceted. Tom Rathman was the new era coming in. But I think that, kind of the odd thing is I think there's 5 fullbacks in the Hall of Fame, but it's Jim Brown. I think it's Jim Taylor. Marion Motley's there. There's a couple of old school, traditional runners, but it's not. There's been a change in what the fullback position became, and that is anybody from the modern era going to go in? How do you do that one? I think Tom has the best opportunity, truth be told, just because he generated some great statistics on great championship teams with the San Francisco 49ers. We talked about Lorenzo Neal and just talent over time at one of the most physical, violent positions in the game of football is a great career. So it has changed, throughout a number of times. I think that the 90s was kind of the glory decade for the position. If you go back and look at all the guys that were playing in the 90s, that was probably our best decade. And then the dreaded best show on turf moved in. And even though they had James Hodges, who was a hell of a fullback, and they had a great running game, from the 2 tight end fullback, personnel package with Marshall Faulk, they were impossible to cover in that offense when they went to 4 wide receivers. So somebody's got to leave the field. And that's where we've seen that happen is where do we create the mismatch as we go down the ladder positionally? And the fullback position is usually the one that pays the price. And just as you start to have that uptick and you've got, the Kyle Juszczyks and the Patrick Ricards of the world starting to bring some notoriety back to it. Last year we have the most 13 personnel, ever used, which is 1 running back, 3 tight ends. So now we've got, the tight ends, after the wide receivers already put us on the sideline. Now we got the tight ends and the fullback position on the sideline. So the hardest part is because we've pushed it down now. How many high schools, how many colleges are using the fullback position? So we're not developing the fullback position to be able to come to the NFL. So we're transitioning somebody that we think can play the fullback position. And Patrick Ricard has done it. He's done an amazing job. And we've seen a couple of guys do that. But it's very, very different because the collision with the fullback is 6 yards, 8 yards of space, where a lot of these positions, the defensive tackle, the tight end, that's a hand placement, technique, leverage, and fullback is all mentality and will. My coach Joe Brodsky would say there's not a lot of great technique on that block, and I'm like, hey, did he make the tackle? If he didn't make the tackle, it should be a plus. All right, there's not a lot of technique that's going on out there in some of these collisions. So it's a unique position. It's definitely a different position, and the evolution of it has been. It's been challenging at times. It's been frustrating at times, but it seems to be coming back a little bit. We're seeing some of these teams lean into the run game a little bit more because our defenses are getting smaller in the fronts. So who knows? Maybe we have a resurgence. We got to go out and scout some of these colleges that are still developing and utilizing a true fullback in their offenses and see if we get a little bit of an uptick here.
I think it would be a crime if Lorenzo Neal doesn't make it to the Hall of Fame. He was so good for so long and
and that's the big thing. Not only was he so good, but he was so good for so long in so many different offenses. Tom Rathman. I mean, he's the modern day. He's the modern day fullback on great teams. I mean, that's the biggest thing is you talk about the position, and it's key to a lot of the really successful teams, during the 90s. You go back and look at all the Super Bowl champions. They were running that, and it was that offense of the time. It was, when the Rams came in and started flipping everything on its head with the greatest show on turf. But prior to that, that whole decade is Super Bowl champions with a fullback, not in their offense, but a predominant role in their offense.
I saw this good story. Sean Merriman, the linebacker for the Chargers, was telling it. He had like a holdout during camp. He was telling us like welcome to the NFL story. He had like a holdout during camp, and then he finally signed the deal. And his first thing in camp, he's going up against, I think it was Lorenzo Neal. Yeah, and he, like, everyone's going 70% speed, and he's trying to show everybody like, yeah, this is why you paid me. So he goes 100%, and he said he hits Lorenzo Neal in the drill. It was like a one-on-one in the hole, whatever. And he said it hurt. He felt like running into concrete, but he won the rep. And he was so pumped up, and he's like, doing his celebration whenever he gets back in line. And when he made his way to the front, Lorenzo Neal cut the line and went again. He said when they hit, he had like a double shoulder stinger, and he's like, I'll never hit that guy again.
Sam Gash is another one. Yeah, Tony Saragusa told me the hardest hit he took was at a practice with Sam Gash.
Yeah, they're a different breed of fullbacks.
Yeah,
You gotta be nuts.
I have found a lot of stability in my own life through faith in Jesus, and I am always interested in how others think about it. Has faith, in whatever form it takes for you, ever become more real when football could not fix something?
Oh gosh, yeah, my faith journey has been very. I don't want to call it complicated, but and maybe sometimes I can't even use unique, because when I share with people, it seems like they've had kind of a similar journey as well. But grew up Presbyterian. My wife is Catholic. We raised our kids Episcopalian to meet in the middle. I try to live life with no regrets, but if I have one that's large, it is I should have let my wife Diane raise our kids as Catholics, because she was home with them on the weekends. I was gone doing the broadcasting, and I've gone to Bible studies that have been held by Baptist ministers. The reading of the scripture is, to me, the one thing that hooks you when you get somebody who's really good at reading scripture and explaining scripture, because they can speak the Greek or the Hebrew, and the translation maybe not as strong into the English, and you really start to hear meaningful stories come from that. I found that was really good. But I think the biggest thing is what allows you to grow your relationship with Jesus. And for a long time in my life, Jesus was like a new student at school. I knew who he was. I'd heard what he had accomplished, but I never took the time to introduce myself to him and become a friend. And this off season, I guess we can call it off season, or this past year, I had joined my wife at Catholic Mass for several years. I had gone to Catholic Mass with some of the guys on my crew, and it was something that resonated with me, because that same Mass is being held all over the world. We're doing the same readings, the same gospel. The homily is going to be a little bit different based on the priest who's doing it. The flexibility of the schedule to be able to maintain your connection with God and with Jesus and your faith, paired with the rigor and the confidence in the Catholic faith was something that was really intriguing to me. And on the Easter Vigil this year, I was inducted into the Catholic Church, and that's been very meaningful to me. I think the biggest thing is, for me, the Eucharist, and not being able to participate in the Eucharist when I went to Catholic Mass, and how important it is to the Catholic Mass, and now being able to participate in the Eucharist is something I'm very proud of, and just continuing to learn and to grow in that. But I think the biggest thing is, for me, is I was one of those guys who only took time for prayer when prayer was needed, and didn't make prayer a part of your day. And I'm trying to get better with that, where my dialogue with Jesus is not when I'm in a spot where I think I need his help or guidance, but sometimes just to check in and see how everything's going.
I love the new kid at school analogy. It's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, and when I don't know. I got into The Chosen. I think The Chosen was at a perfect time for me during my faith journey. You knew the stories, but to bring those stories to life, one of my favorite things in the Bible now is the Sermon on the Mount, which you heard about, but that's one of the things I really kind of dug into a little bit, and that was something that was brought to light in one of my Bible study classes, and yeah, but I'll never. To me, when you have the opportunity to be around somebody that can do the scriptures, with the Greek, with the Hebrew, that was the one that really set the hook in me, because they can get into the word and what it actually meant prior to translation into the English, and just the strength and the visual image that it creates is very, very powerful.
Before we close, I always ask our guests to brag about their family for a minute, and I know you have a great one. Daryl, please go ahead.
Well, it all starts with my awesome wife. We celebrated our 30th anniversary this year. She's amazing, fearless, incredible mom. Just so honored to be able to call her my wife. Still looks like she's 35 or 40. So I'm people see us together and they wonder what the old guy's doing with the very pretty young girl. Two wonderful kids, our son Aiden and our daughter Evan, 19 months apart, which has been awesome, because they're thick as thieves, have a great relationship, that I think Diane and I are both proud of how we've fostered that. Aiden, it was one of the greatest conversations I've ever had, Tim. In ninth grade, he made the decision that he wanted to play lacrosse because he thought lacrosse gave him the best opportunity to go to college. And truth be told, down in Texas, football's hard, and lacrosse is a new sport. And my wife told me, "Hey, Aiden needs to have a conversation with you tonight, and I need you to be really open and just listen." And we had a great conversation with my son in ninth grade, telling me that he was going to make the decision to focus on lacrosse and not play football anymore. And so that was very hard for him, with me being dad. So that's always been a very, very meaningful moment between the two of us, that we were able to have that great conversation at that time, and he was able to use that to get himself into Michigan, to play lacrosse. Things didn't work out there, but did graduate Michigan with honors, and so he was exactly right in ninth grade. It did give him the best opportunity to get to a great school and get a great education. So very, very proud of him. He's out in the real business world right now. Took his LSATs last year. Still waiting on a couple more schools here before he makes a decision on what he's going to do in 2027 for law school. So, which I think is perfect for him. He is ever the curious one and can have a lengthy, detailed conversation with you on multiple topics, and you wonder where he gets the information, and then you wonder where he gets the time to have the information. So he's down in Austin, Texas right now, so he's doing awesome. And then our daughter also did the lacrosse route. She was a multi-sport athlete, went to an all-girls school, and they made her do a lot of different things from an athletic standpoint because they had such a small class. So she played field hockey, she played basketball, she played soccer, became a lacrosse player. Well, that was her primary sport. She swam on the swim team one year. So just, very proud of her and what she did. And she actually played lacrosse at Syracuse for 4 years. Kind of caught a big transition. She caught Gary leaving the girls team, going to the boys team. And then a new head coach there, lost her recruiter, lost her head coach, new girls coming in. So she's our one that's tried and tested in resiliency. So she did a 5th year at Virginia Tech, had a very good experience there, actually upset Syracuse while she was there, and had a great game, just played awesome against her old teammates. So very proud of her. And she is now working with the NFL down in New York City with the Legends players. So she's been to Super Bowl. She's been to the combine. She's been to the draft. She'll get to go overseas next year for one of the games. So she's having a great time, and very proud of her. But a lot of that credit for everything they've accomplished goes to my wife, because she was the one who was there on the weekend while I was working, and we know how busy kids' schedules get on the weekends. So lacing up hockey skates for my son and going to gymnastic meets for my daughter, and she's the rock of the family, without a doubt. And now she's transitioned into her new career here over the last 5 or 6 years, working with Allie Beth Allman as a real estate agent down here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So, like I said, fearless, and just a tremendous woman, a tremendous wife, and a tremendous mom.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid-fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
Oh, God, I'm going to go with it has to be the marriage, because the birth of the child doesn't happen unless you're married.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
Probably my own doubts about what I could do. When we talk about my journey to Syracuse, the neck injury was something that I consider to be part of the game.
What are you most excited about?
I'll go family. I'm excited to see what the kids continue to do, where they continue to grow. Have they found their spot? Especially for Aiden. Aiden is he's the one right now that is not on that path that I know he wants to be on. That's taken him in the direction where he would like to go. So just very proud of him. Watching him kind of navigate that whole section. And then for our daughter, just hard work and resiliency does pay off. And it's sometimes you have to live those life lessons to really let them sink in. And I think that she's done that over the last 4 or 5 years.
What advice would you give your younger self?
I learned this from Blake Bortles during a production meeting.
I don't mean to laugh. I played with Blake at UCF, so I can only imagine what this is going to be.
It was great. So we had Jacksonville late in the year, and it was probably like week 12, and it was when they were having that really good season. And I asked him a question and said, this has to be really gratifying to you to have a season like this and to prove all those doubters wrong that didn't believe in you. And he said, well, I used to be wired like that, but he goes, why should I worry about people that I don't even know and how that impacts me? So he goes, I've kind of shifted my perspective and my motivation. Instead of proving those who doubted me wrong, I try to prove those who believed in me right. And I told you about the Jim Butterfield story at Ithaca. That kind of flipped my world upside down, because I was still that guy at that point. I was still proving people wrong. And it does, and one of the points that Blake made is it kind of comes from a bad spot anyways, right? There's a little bit of negativity to it, where when you're proving people right who believed in you, that it's all positive, it's all good. So that was a really big shift for me. So I try to share that with young guys. If you're somebody who gets your motivation from proving people wrong who doubted you, see what happens the next time you do it, and use the motivation to come from inside of you to prove those who believed in you right, and see if there's any difference there. And it's a pretty powerful shift in how you think.
Yeah, I actually really like that. I can't believe he said it.
Yeah, right.
But
and for anybody, I mean, what he went through, it was unbelievable. I mean, your peers in the NFL that you really aren't even connected to are taking pot shots at you. So I was really happy for him to have that season.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Do you have any book recommendations for us or for the listeners?
I don't get to read as much as I do for leisure. With all my game prep and stuff, I've tried to do some of the kind of, make yourself a better you types of books. But I still go back to, When Pride Still Mattered, the Vince Lombardi book, American Sniper. I read a lot about military. I got into that. I was, kind of an old Tom Clancy guy, Robert Ludlum guy, and then kind of slid into some of the books about lone survivor, Marcus Luttrell, amazing. And I've got one of my best friends in high school is a 30-year Navy SEAL. So, it just add a little bit of a connection for me. Some of those great books about Chris Kyle, about Marcus Luttrell, and stuff like that are really, really powerful books. But yeah, When Pride Still Mattered was probably the first one I read that I, about the game of football, and really resonated with me.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
I got all the big ones out. I was able to weave those into everything. I was able to thank a lot of people that have been very important in my life on this platform, which I'm grateful for. Thank you so much. I guess we wanted to get big picture. I hope everybody has a great 250th celebration about our country, and that we can put our differences aside for a couple of days and show a little bit of respect and gratitude for the greatest country in the world that has provided so many people an opportunity to live a lifestyle that they never dreamed possible. So I think it's as contentious as I can ever remember it. Growing up, I've been here for 60 years. So let's say kind of at 16, you start to wander in some of the stuff from a big picture theme about politics. So that's 44 years, and I don't ever remember it being as contentious as it is. And for us to make assumptions on people based on their political views. So I think we need to show a little bit of grace and a little bit of gratitude and a little bit of understanding as we go through, and a little bit of respect as we go through the celebration of the 250th anniversary of our country. We are not perfect, but we are the best country that's out there.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. So at the end of every episode, the last question I always ask is, who are a couple guests, people that you know personally, that you think we should try to get on the podcast for future episodes?
Shoot, Marcus Luttrell. If you could ever get Marcus and Morgan on together, brothers. If when you read the book, you'll get it. And now they're both involved in politics now, down here in the state of Texas. I know he's gotten more popular, but Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, he's got a great platform now with the trade schools, which I think is very intriguing. So he just always seems like a person that's very wise and can share a lot of information. I think Mia Hamm, would be intriguing, and not just because the World Cup is now, but just kind of some of the things that is a girl growing up playing soccer against the boys. I've always thought her story was really cool. Condoleezza Rice would be a fantastic one to have. She came in to the booth one time. We were doing a game in San Francisco, and I got to visit with her. And then I was at the Masters one year and bumped into her. She was at, during the par 3 tournament. She was at one of the greens and got a chance to visit with her. I'm always so impressed with her football knowledge, and then the relationship that she has with her dad. Going back to when the Street and Smith would come out and they'd sit down and go through it and get ready for SEC football that year. She's got a really cool story. So she'd be high on that list too.
Daryl, thank you for joining us. Your story is not just about football success. It is about sacrifice, identity, injury, reinvention, and the kind of work that often matters most when fewer people are looking. You helped define a role that was easy to miss and hard to replace. We appreciate your time, your honesty, and your willingness to look back at what it all cost and what it gave you. On a personal note, I really appreciate you going out of your way to come visit me when you're close. I hope God continues to bless you and your family, my friend. Let's talk soon.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. And I think you encapsulated the fullback position as well as anybody ever has. And when we were at our last visit, all of us that were there left, and we were so happy to see you around family and to see all the pictures on the shelf of all the grandkids and all the family members. It was very heartwarming for us. So thank you for everything that you've done for me. I don't know if you realize an impact that you had on all the younger guys over at Syracuse University when you were there, and the model that you created for us of how to be not only a fierce competitor on the field, but probably more important, a gracious, humble person off the field. So I know there's a lot of other guys that are very appreciative that our paths crossed at Syracuse University, and you could be one of our mentors and models as we got older.
Daryl, I say that it was cute when there were one or two grandkids running around. Now it looks more like a zoo, but
Yeah, it was impressive. It was impressive. You're going to have to lengthen that shelf here pretty soon.
yeah, that's right. Thanks so much. This was great.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I really enjoyed it. So it's so much fun to go back and think about some stuff that you forget about. So thank you for letting me share my journey and really bringing a light to shine on some of the key people that get overlooked with my success, who I owe a debt of gratitude dearly to them.